So I know you probably noticed that there's something a little off today. I was a little off this morning. This isn't the same guy that's normally up here. And I have to apologize right off the bat. I'm sorry. I don't have as beautiful a knees as Jim. And so I have to cover them with pants. So please forgive me. But it's obvious that something is off. We've been going through Core 52, where we're looking at 52 different scriptures throughout the year that we would look at that give us a good base for what we believe as Christians, a good base for what we practice as Christians. But we've taken a little bit of a aside from that too, if you haven't been here since we left that. Now we're looking at Christmas time. It's Advent, the time when we celebrate Christ's coming. But we're not looking at the regular Christmas this year. We're looking at something askew. We've been looking at the genealogy of Jesus. I know that that's everybody's favorite part. Blake is home today, and I asked him to read some in the Bible, and the first thought was, oh, no, isn't that a genealogy what you asked me to read? And I think that's probably most of our first reactions. But we've been doing that for this Advent. Because as we read about the different people in the genealogy of Jesus, we're taking a look at some of those snapshots of those people and trying to get a sense of who were the earthly forefathers and mothers of Jesus. Today we're going to look at someone, that a lot of people don't know about, and if you do know, it's usually a negative thought of her and her character. Today we're going to look at Tamar, but we're also going to look at Judah, because Judah and Tamar are intricately related. You can't tell one story without the other. So who is Judah? Well, one, we know that later on in the history, Israel and Judah, when it splits, it becomes its own country. Right? You have Israel and you have Judah. It was the biggest, strongest tribe in Israel. And he is the one that it's named after. It was the royal tribe, the one that the king comes from. It was not only the royal tribe, but he was a leader. We think of him as a leader. We think of the lion of the tribe of Judah, and that, even though that's not Judah himself, it kind of, wow, he's kind of a big, important dude, right? He's the forefather of the Messiah. He's the one that was chosen by God to be part of that lineage. Usually when we think of Judah, it's kind of, he's got a prominent position. And then there's Tamar, and most of us don't even think of her most times. Maybe we've heard of her, or we read her occasionally in a genealogy here or there, because I know that that's our favorite reading. But Tamar is not very well known. She's not from one of the chosen. We have Abraham, the father of faith. He has Isaac, the son of promise, to Sarah when she's very old, and Abraham is very old. To get Isaac a wife, he doesn't trust any of the people in Canaan, the promised land where God sent him. He can't get a wife from there. He has to send back to where he came from to find a special wife, Rebekah. And then Rebekah and Isaac, they have Jacob and they have Esau. And Jacob and Esau in that thing, they as well. Jacob gets his wife back from family members. First Leah, he really wanted Rachel, right? And that's kind of where this story comes in. It's in this middle of the last part of Genesis where we have the story of Joseph. One of the two sons that Jacob, or Israel, right, had with Rachel. Joseph and Benjamin. And this is a little sidelight that we get right in there, chapter 38 of Genesis. The story of Joseph is about 37 through the end of the book. But we have a little snapshot in 38 that gives us Tamar and and Judah. See, she's not only she's not very well known, and she's not from these chosen people. She's kind of a trickster in the story. We think of her maybe, if we do remember her as a prostitute. And so we tend to not think very highly of her. I mean, why is she there? Why is she in the genealogy? Something is definitely askew. I'm going to read Genesis 38, and I promise it's not a genealogy. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. And she conceived and bore a son and called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son and called his name Shelah. He was at Kezib when she bore him. I think this is the time where my father or maybe some others would ask, do you know where they come from? One son right after the other, Onan, Shelah. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he ejaculated on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, she covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought, she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come into you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, I will send a young goat from the flock. So she said, will you give me a pledge till you send it? Then he said, what pledge shall I give you? So she said, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. And so she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adulamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is that harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot. No harlot in this place. So he returned to Judah and said, I can't find her. Also the men of the place said, there was no harlot in this place. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after, that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out, and let her be burned. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please, determine who these are, the signet and cord and staff. So Judah acknowledged him and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he never knew her again. Now it came to pass at that time, for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was that when she was giving birth, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Perez, which means breach. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I mean, what is going on here? There's a lot. But what is it? I'm going to talk through a few things and we'll get there. First, this whole brother thing. Have any of you had that going on? Know any friends that had to marry their brother's wife because your brother died? Not really something that we practice too much here in America. But it still does happen in some places in the Middle East. The Kurds are known for it, actually, that live in Turkey and Syria and Iraq. And what it literally means, it's called levirate marriage. And it's not from Levi, from one of the other brothers of Judah. It's from a Latin term that means husband's brother. And it was kind of an old way that you took care of the woman that you brought into the family. See, because if she didn't have any kids, if there was no male heir, there was no one to take care of her. And so what would happen is the brother would have to come along, and he would have to take her as wife, and the firstborn son would not be his, but would be counted to his brother. So that she would have an heir, someone to take care of her, and someone to protect her. So she got passed from wicked, to Onan, wicked, and God took them both out. But Judah didn't say, "Man, my sons were wicked. What did I do wrong?" Of course not. Judah didn't do anything wrong, right? What does Judah do? Blames her. He blames Tamar. And he's not having his little one. I got one left. I got one son left. And sons were a big deal, right? I got one left, and there's no way I'm giving him to her. She's a black widow. Right? He's not dying. She's not getting him. So he kind of lets out a little lie. Yeah, well, he's kind of young right now. Why don't you go home to your dad, and when he's ready, I'll send him your way. I don't know. Maybe he's hoping she finds somebody else. Maybe he's hoping she'll just die with him then. I don't know what he was hoping totally, but it wasn't that his youngest son would be given to her. He didn't want it to happen. We also read of this in other places in the Bible, so it's not something that just happened once. You know, probably the greatest example is the kinsman redeemer when you read the book of Ruth, right? Her husband dies. There's nobody else there. There's no brothers. They return to Israel. And it's not just the husband's brother, but it literally became, and the thing was that it was any relative. And the nearer, the more you had the responsibility. So first would be the brother, and then you'd go on from there. That's why Boaz, when he goes to get Ruth, when Ruth and that are talking, he says, "Oh, there's one closer than I am." And he has to make sure that one doesn't want to take the right of the kinsman redeemer to take her in marriage. But Judah's having none of that. He's not going to do what society and what has been put forth in his community and his family is the expectation to give her this brother, or to bring any other family member for that matter to marry her. So she's put off on the side. So you got this old custom, but Judah's not following it in any way. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. And then I always like this, these sudden death things. Right? Er's wicked. God goes, whoop, wicked. I think we wish that we had that power sometimes, right? Oh, they're wicked. Until we start thinking about how we live our own lives, right? Or that somebody else would have that power over us. But the fact is, God is to be feared. Not in a cowering, trembling knee sort of way, but knowing that he's righteous and holy and that he will judge. He will definitely judge. Sometimes right now, sometimes now, but always, always in the end. Because we have one time to die and then face judgment, the New Testament tells us. And what about this signet cord and staff thing? So she gave him a signet ring and, gave him the staff and the cord. Basically, it's getting time to cut my hair again. That's another way today's askew, right? Because you've got this guy with luscious locks up here compared to Jim. Now, when these luscious locks need cut, I go down to 11th Street Barber oftentimes. And before COVID, you could only do cash. Well, I didn't know that the first time I went, and I sat down, got my hair cut, looking good, feeling good, and they said, "Would you like to pay?" And I said, "Yeah." And I got out my debit card, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we only take cash." I said, "Well, how about if I hand you my driver's license, and I'll run down to the ATM down the street, and I'll be right back." You see, the signet ring and the cord and the staff, that was the driver's license. It served a different purpose, right? It was the ring that said, "This is Judah." His staff, I'm sure, he's a big, important dude. It was unique. It was something that identified him. There's no doubt whose it was. Just like my license says exactly who I am. Something that was needed for everyday occurrences, so you wouldn't want to let it sit there too long. It has a certain value to it, right? Not so much that you can't leave it, but enough that, man, it makes life miserable if you don't have it. So he gives her that. Maybe even another way to look at it is, some people have those phones now that you plug in a little thing and they can run your card right there. Now, it's not really that you're giving them cash, is it? You're really just saying, I trust that this card's going to get me the cash that I need. So one way or the other, that's what this cord, the signet, the staff, they're saying, hey, this guy's going to pay up. He's going to have this to be done. And he does. Try later. What about the clothes? It talks about widow's clothes. She's in widow's clothes. So she's gone from being a widow. She got married. No more widow's clothes. And she's, God takes him out again. Next husband. And she's in widow's clothes. But she was little. He's not a very big guy. Or he's got years. And the custom was not to wear them forever because you became a widow, but it was for a period of time. When Heather and I lived in Ukraine, oftentimes people that had some sort of Orthodox background had periods of time where they were a widow, where they wore black, where they did these things in their life. They would bring them at certain periods throughout the first, 40 days was one of them, that they brought candy to remember the person that died. And then again in a year, they would bring some things and kind of do that. But after that year, it was over. But Tamar here is still wearing widow's clothes much after the time period. But the reason she's doing it is it's a sign to everyone around her that she is owed a a kinsman redeemer. She's owed a brother. She's saying before her community, Judah's not treating me right. I am a widow. He has a son. And that should be my husband. He should take care of me. But he's not. And then it talks about a veil. Now, a veil can be used in a couple ways there. And one is exactly what they say, a prostitute. But one of them is just to conceal your identity. Judah took it as a prostitute, right? But what did the townspeople say when he sent back his servant to pay? They said, we haven't seen a prostitute. There's no harlot here. We don't know what you're talking about. So Tamar's behavior, when they could have seen it, not behind the closed doors, was not one that made them think that she was a harlot. He was the one that mistook her for that. She was not. In fact, it's interesting, the clothes thing and the prostitute. You know, prostitute, the word in Hebrew here, what it means? It means holy woman. Prostitute, the word for prostitute in Hebrew here is holy woman. Now why? It means holy woman, I think, for a couple of reasons, but one of them here is the one that would normally be the way when you look at history. Many of the idol-worshipping religions of the area had ritualistic prostitution as part of their worship. And so a holy woman were doing acts for their little g gods. For fertility, for the land to grow, for all these other things. That's one reason why that would be the case. But I think it has a second meaning here. You see, Tamar, by wearing those widow's clothes and saying, I'm owed, I mean mistreated. Then she changes into regular clothes but with a veil. All she was doing when she sat there, and all she was doing even behind closed doors with Judah, because was acting upon her legal rights. Because guess who the next closest redeemer was after Shelah? Judah. So you see, Tamar here is not a prostitute in the sense of someone who is doing fertility rites for some idol, some local pagan god. She's a holy woman because she's doing what was upright and honorable to her husbands to pass on their name. But what does Judah do? Judah's a good guy, right? I mean, he's the leader of the tribe. Burn her! Burn her. A lot of grace and mercy there, isn't there? Well, he's only following the law, you know. He's a righteous man that he is in this whole situation. In quotes. Leviticus 21:9 says that is one of the prices for prostitution, is to burn her. But the reason I think that Tamar here is a holy woman, not because of the prostitution to a pagan god, but I think that she was a holy woman, is her name has the meaning of straight, upright. It's actually the word used in some cases for a palm tree. Tall and straight, Palm trees are used as figures of beauty as well. And I think that she has an enduring beauty, and that her character one is one here in the story that's meant to be portrayed as one of upright and straight and true. And so you see, when we read through that genealogy and we get to Tamar and we think we know what's going on and we think that she's a prostitute and somehow God did that, we really figure out that what we thought we knew was askew. And old Judah. Our general impression is a positive one. But let's look at that. If you go back one chapter, and you don't have to now, but you can do what Blake's doing today and reading chapters 37 through 50 if you want. He sold his brother. And some people think, okay, well, he was going to sell his brother because, he didn't want him to die. But when you read it, you really realize, no, he just figured if they were going to kill him, they might as well have somebody else kill him and he'd get some money out of it. I mean, why let this go to waste? Let's maximize our value here. Maybe he went to MBA school, I don't know. Let's maximize his value by selling his brother, knowing that he's probably going to die in hard labor or be killed. He left his people. The reason that we read right at the beginning here, Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite. He departs from his brothers. He's not living with them anymore. He's leaving them. Not because God said, I have a promised land for you. I have a mission for you, a job for you to do that only you can do, righteous. No. He's out of there. Where does he find his wife? Does he go back and have Dad or somebody else or even himself go and find someone special from that land where they came from? Because the people of the land around him worship too many terrible gods and things like that they didn't want to have in their line? No, he does what a lot of men do and go, wow, she's good looking. Yeah, I think that one's the one for me. Right? That's what he does. He left his people. Then he's going to worship another god. Right? If he thinks Tamar is a prostitute, it's not like a prostitute that we think of today. It's somebody, he's taking part in rituals to a pagan god. He's worshiping another god. He's left his people. He's done everything the wrong way. He's failed his community and family duties. He's not taking care of the widow and the orphan. He's going to leave her to whatever. I already said he's willing to murder and go a whore. Christmas askew, indeed. But you know what? We have these expectations of Christmas, right? Cherubic-faced angels. Pageantry. Clean winter scenes. But the fact is that's never been what it was about. It's not cherubic angels, but when the angels came, the shepherds quaked in fear. Because they realized there's real power behind God and his messengers. When, instead of the grand pageantry that we think of with putting up the tree and the beauty of it all, and even parades in some places, and going and sitting on Santa's lap, and everything being this way, Christ came to no room in the end. We think of clean scenes, winter, white, beautiful. They don't even show the grime of the road when the one-horse open sleigh is in the picture, do they? But our Savior came to a world in the stench and filth of the crap of a stable. But the good news is, even though our expectations are askew, it's a good thing. And the good thing is this: no matter how badly it seems like we think of Tamar, or how badly Judah actually was, God used that for his chosen one. He uses you and me to carry out his work as well. Christmas is about a God who looks at the heart. He doesn't look at what it looked like on the outside for Tamar. He looks at who she was. Not how she was misinterpreted. Not how she was taken advantage of. He looks at her for who she was. And he's a God who sent his prince, the son of the king, right? His prince of peace into humble circumstances. He sifts out between Tamar and her heart and Judah, who was accepted as a leader of the community and all these other things, and his heart. But even more than that, he comes back and redeems Judah. And you'll see that in some of the later chapters of that passage there from 37 through 50. He's actually the one that's willing to put his life on the line later on for Joseph's other little brother from his mother Rachel. When the brothers think that that brother's going to get killed, Judah says, no, take me, please, please, spare his life, take mine. See, because our God is not one that does things in the path that we always think. He takes a turn that makes us think, wow, this is crazy. This is askew. It's a little bit off. It's not him that's off, though, it's us. And it's a good thing. Not that we're off, but that he's not. Because he puts his Prince of Peace in those humble circumstances. He sifts and measures the heart and looks at the heart. He wants to see the true you. He wants to help you endure the crud of life. And he wants to transform you. You see, he wants to bring us back to him. He wants us to reconcile ourselves. He wants us, whether you're Mark or Joni or Mary or Wes, and even me, not even me, especially me. He wants to reconcile us to him because of the crud in our lives, just like in Judah's life. He wants to use us for his work and his kingdom and his everlasting glory, even though we're unworthy. Because he, just like he transformed Judah and Tamar, he is worthy, he is gracious, and he is merciful. He doesn't want to be separated from us forever because of that crud in our lives. He wants to wipe it all away and embrace us and bring us to him, so that we can inherit his blessings. His blessings here on earth and for eternity in heaven. And the thing is, all he says that we have to do is ask. He's done the work. He came in those humble circumstances a little over 2,000 years ago. He lived through them. He gave his life for them. He continues to live and interact with those who ask him. And he puts the offer out for all. If you haven't asked Jesus to take care of the crud in your life, if you haven't asked Jesus to look at your heart, to help you understand how you do love him, even if it's imperfectly, to take that crud away and to give you his blessings, to have you take part in his project to build his kingdom, you can do so today. See me afterwards. Talk to me. Talk to somebody that's sitting next to you or brought you here. But do it. Because he wants to get rid of all that. Because life, as we all know, is not a pristine winter scene. Only Jesus is white as snow. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. But most of all, Lord, we thank you that you take us, people like Tamar, people like Judah, people like Tim, and you can transform us, and you can take away that sin, and you can reconcile us to ourselves, and you can make us people who once wanted to murder and go a-whoring, and make us people that would give our lives for somebody else, and take part in any way we could to build your kingdom. We thank you and praise you, and ask you to help us never to forget that as we get ready to celebrate the birth of your Son. In Jesus' name.